So we've heard a lot of people talk recently about tech, AI, all those aspects of home buying. The real reason people buy homes has nothing to do with tech, AI. It has to do with emotion. And so here we're going to talk a little bit about an ironic statement, the art of buying a home in a high interest rate market. That's kind of like saying the art of graduating college with a 1.9 GPA. You still graduate, you still get the home. It's just a painful process to get there, however you think about it. So, who buys a home when interest rates are high? Well, I technically just did, so I guess I'm one of those people. But a lot of people. The economy is not slowing down. Home buying is not slowing down to the degree that people thought it would. People are still buying homes. People still want to fulfill the American dream of home ownership. As we move on to some of the data, and we'll talk a lot about data here, is there a trend between interest rates and average home prices? The chart behind me is crystal clear. There is no real trend between what happens with interest rates and what happens with home prices. Home prices have consistently gone up. There are some bubbles. California is a bubble. Texas is a bubble. There's other bubbles that have existed. Some have popped, some haven't popped. But home prices keep going up. Interest rates fluctuate. Interest rates are based purely on the avenues of the economy. And so while you could argue the two have something to do with each other, you could equally argue that they don't. And so when you put that together, no one wants to buy a house at an 8% interest rate. No one wants to buy a house at a 7% interest rate. No one wants to know that they have a 7% interest rate and their neighbor refinanced in 2000 at 2.75. Those are data points. And so some of those data points do exist. But what we talk about here is the why people are doing this. So there are 5 key facets, and this is all driven by data. This is not my opinion. What impacts the desirability to buy a home in a high interest rate market? So the word buy is here, purchase. We're not talking about refinancing, but why would you do it? So you have sometimes financial reasons, sometimes the economy. I'm going to flip over news. Sometimes people go with the peer pressure, the news, I need to buy homes, prices are going up. Some people talk about affordability. But the number one reason that someone would buy a home in a market that is a high interest rate market is for family or lifestyle reasons. And so that's when your EQ surpasses your IQ and says, I want this home for these reasons. So we talk about the EQ versus the IQ as we go through this. So the average U.S. home buyer in 2022 was a family. I don't really think that's shocking to anyone here. Only second to single females being up next. These are the people who buy homes. There's a lot of people who also rent homes. I've rented homes for a large portion of my life in California. But we're talking here about people who are buying homes and the home buyers here. So these data points, they fill into the reasons, the whys that someone would buy a home when interest rates are high. So I'll give a little bit about my personal story. My personal story, I have an amazing place down in San Diego. I have a landlord who said he was never coming back to California and could keep the house as long as he wanted. It was great, loved the house. Then he said, you know what, my wife and I don't like living in South Dakota, shocker, and we're moving back to California. That was my reason to go from renting to buying. I've owned many homes in my life. At this point, I was renting. So that was a reason to go into a market where the first pre-approval letter I got was at 8.1% interest rate. Not what I ended up with, but that is where the cards kind of started. So we go into this a little bit more. Why could data show us that it's okay to buy in a high interest rate market? In 19 of the top 20 metros in the United States, demand, meaning pricing up or competitive demand. So Susie offers $900,000 on a home. Bobby offers $1 million, $100,000 more. Those scenarios have existed for the longest time. Those scenarios have neutralized, flatlined, and in many cases have actually gone down in the high interest rate market. Because in a higher interest rate market, affordability becomes the key lever to getting a loan. So when affordability becomes a lever, it takes the demand down. When the demand goes down, the competition goes down. And that means the bidding wars ultimately go down. So these two factors mean that the home buyer, I'm not saying it's a buyer's market, but what I'm saying is the home buyer has more negotiating power, and it's less of a seller's market. And that's in 19 of the top 20 metros. So you can look at this. The data is clear. We all look at the same data sets. That is the main reason that we'll talk about. Jump into it a little bit more. How are people getting around this? Real estate agents have been flurrying. They don't know what to do. Selling agents can sell in days sometimes. Buyer's agents don't really know if their clients are going to have the financing. They don't know how to find the right clients. So if you're a real estate agent, and some real estate agents and loan officers have been making a ton of money over the past couple of years, now you really have to focus on kind of your career and how you're going to do it. We see things like real estate agents offer craft beer sessions, Pilates, how they can find new clients. Because right now, the scary number is mortgage rates at an all-time high. They're not at an all-time high. My parents had a 14.9% interest rate in 1982. So they're not at an all-time high, but they're definitely at a high of my lifetime, probably high of most people in this room's lifetime. So those are all the facets that add up to the why and the how. The second reason comes down to there's a little bit less buyer's fatigue. Buyer's fatigue is real. It happens in any transaction. The most simple transaction you can look at is something you really, really want to buy, and every time you try to buy it, someone outbids you. And unfortunately, that's a home in many places. Days on market is a real thing. So days on market being up 14 days on average year over year is good for a home buyer. It's neutral for financing, which is the world we're in, and maybe it's a negative for a seller. But if you rewind back to the mid-2015s, we were talking 80, 90 days on market. So these numbers are still real good in the grand scheme of things as you look at it. So when you say, okay, buyer fatigue is the second big reason. So what would be the third reason that someone would buy in a high interest rate market? So home ownership means equity. This is my family here. This was the last day of school a couple days ago. And so emotion, the EQ surpasses the IQ. I've been in financing. I've worked for a handful of the companies represented here today. I know that a 5.6% interest rate is not the rate that I want to get. I know that the DTI that I have is not the DTI that I wanted. I know that I've personally pushed myself and my family. But the EQ surpassed the IQ, even for all of us who are very adamantly trained and understand this inside and out. This isn't a rental property. It's not an investment. This is a family property. And those are the things that overlay here. So when we come down to it, the three reasons, the why. Why would buying a home in a high interest rate market make sense for many? I didn't say for any. I'm actually saying for many people here. First reason is there's less competition. So in the higher markets, the 19 of the top 20 metros, it is actually working in terms of the affordability ratios that are looked at. And that's based purely on the number of people, the number of buyers who are saturated in that market competing against each other. When rates go up, there are less buyers, there's less competition, there are less people competing. That means that there's less demand. The less demand means there's more negotiating power. It doesn't seem like it makes sense, and it does not benefit America as a whole, but in larger metros or more expensive metros, it does. And in this case, that represents 19 of the top 20 metros. Secondarily, as you look at things, buyer fatigue. There's less buyer fatigue happening, and that means people are able to get into a home that they want easier. Doesn't mean their financing's any different. Doesn't mean there's some new AI platform that we all just talk about that means you push button, get mortgage. Those things aren't as real as we want them to be, but they do exist. And so when there's less fatigue out there, then that means the emotional aspect of home buying is stronger. And then the last thing that won't change, there are some markets that it will change, but for the majority of markets it won't change, is equity. You will still get equity in a house at some point. Now, it's tough to rent something and pay X and buy something and pay 1.5X a month. That is a tough thing because if you look at that aggregated all the way across, you say, well, right now I'm paying a lot more money and I'm not really gaining much equity. But time and time again, real estate has proven to be the best investment mechanism that the United States has seen. There's actually only one country, two technically, but one big country who has had a better real estate investment, meaning equity is increased more. So Russia has had the average equity value of homes increased almost 3 times what the United States has over the past decade. Finland is a close second. There's a handful of other European countries in there. But it's just interesting to throw those dynamics out there. The data's all there. It's everything you can see. So my point here, buying a home in a high interest rate market is scary. Buying a home in a high interest rate market is not what a lot of people want to do. And no one wants to say to their neighbor, I ended up with a 5.6% interest rate and I'm stoked about it. And the neighbor goes, cool, I've got a 2.75 and I'm stoked about that too. But it's not all about the financing. It's all about the mortgage. It's not all about the rate. It's about the emotional aspects of a lot of it. It's about family. It's about equity. And ultimately, when you survey X number of people, home ownership is the American dream. Sure, driving a Maserati is too, but home ownership is ultimately the American dream. So these were the points that I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to flip AI on its side. I wanted to take tech out of the situation. And I wanted to really just bring the EQ back into home buying because that is really the reason the vast majority of people buy homes. It's for family. It's for emotional reasons, personal reasons, investment reasons. But for primary residence, it's rarely for financial reasons. So with that, I'll give everyone a couple minutes. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to chatting with you all over a drink later on. Thanks.
Thank you.